Damon Benning to preview Week 1 of Big Ten play for Nebraska and take a quick look at the victory over UNI that has Nebraska sitting at 3-0 right now. Damon, I think we've officially seen that jump from year 1 to year 2 that so many people talk about, not from what we saw last week on the field, but from the conversations that seem to be had inside the locker room at halftime. Coach Rule sees a victory on the horizon. Team's not happy with their play. A year ago, those conversations aren't even being had. How do you make of all that?
Yeah, I think that's critical because two things are happening. Number one, the team is taking over their destiny. There's ownership in that locker room, and I think they have skin in the game, and they know the culture well enough where the standard of the torch of the standard bearer has been passed. Yeah. It is now the players. So that one's key. The other thing is there has to be a certain level of trust. Like if you're going to turn it over to your team, you have to know your team pretty well as a coaching staff, and I think for them to sit back and kind of watch that unfold, not only is it kind of like a proud papa moment, but you do have to trust that, okay, they understand exactly what's going on going forward.
Yeah. And you mentioned earlier that you really liked how Coach White broke down last week, how he's looking forward to this week. I thought it was interesting that he mentioned how UNI threw actually a lot of challenges at them. What did you see that UNI did well that challenged Nebraska last Saturday?
I really liked, I called it a little bit of their sweep-keep game where you get a lot of jet motion and they stress you horizontally and quarterbacks have a give-keep read, and they can RPO off of it. And so I think they got away from not just traditional ground and pound, but they still had a level of physicality with downhill run game, but they stressed Nebraska horizontally as well. So I thought the first quarter and a half was a little bit of a feeling out process. And he also took some ownership over the calls and communication, which I can embrace. He said, listen, there's no way around that. There's no hiding from that. That's on me. Yeah. Which I love that accountability portion too, because what he's telling you is things happen in real life.
Yeah.
You can get on a dry erase board and you can draw plays out, but then actually real games happen. Yeah. And they have a dry erase board too. So I really like the fact that Nebraska kind of calmed down and understood actually how they were trying to be attacked and being hesitant and not being sure of the calls. Maybe that led to some of the leaky yards after contact and giving up some of the extra yardage. But the more confident you play, the more sure you are of your tackling. I think we saw all that improve.
Yeah. I mean, the team is already critical of their own play despite only giving up 3 points. Do you find it interesting how the fan base reacted to last Saturday?
I do, but I got to cut the fans a little slack here. Yeah. I think it would be easy to be tough on the fan base, but I think they're learning how to win too.
Yep.
And how to process information. And we kind of want to fast forward, right? Everybody wants the 50-0 trouncing and the pull away and the be dominant, but we got to remember we got to walk before we can run. And Nebraska is in the walking phase. I think right now we have to kind of be appreciative of the whole walking forward. Like we're gaining ground, and that's how you got to look at it. Because I clearly understand, Ave. I got a message the other day on social media. It said, "Listen, I'm cautiously optimistic, but there have been things that we've seen in the non-con that didn't get shored up in conference play. So don't be upset if I'm a little cautious." I absolutely understand that. That's what makes Friday not necessarily a referendum, but it is going to be a pretty good benchmark.
Yeah, it's weird how it's completely different situations, but Illinois last year was coming off the heels of Michigan, where there was obviously let's improve in every area of our game, where this year, even though it was a 34-3 victory, it still felt like there was so many areas to improve on. Now, this Friday presents this amazing opportunity right around the corner to be like, all right, here's our true benchmark.
Yeah, it's interesting because I would probably give the emotional edge to Nebraska. Nebraska's a little surly, a little ornery, right? They weren't real pleased, but they got a chance to get better with a win.
Yeah.
So I think they'll be looking to improve upon that. I'm not so sure anybody outside the guys in that locker room in Champaign expected, or even if they expected, to be undefeated heading into this juncture of this football game. So will they be more like, I'm not going to go as far as to say happy to be here, but maybe not as expectant to be here. Nebraska, on the other hand, is like, we can be better. We're going to do it at home.
Yeah. So we'll look at that matchup. We have a number 22 versus number 24. Illinois' notable win coming over Kansas, which is so weird for me to say. But what has Illinois shown you in their 3-0 start that they present a good amount of challenges this year?
So there's a couple things. Number one, it's not an old Brett Bielema kind of team. Like, I think they've been dynamic outside the numbers.
Yeah.
They can get vertical in the passing game. And while the running game has been okay, it hasn't, I don't think, been as physical as he'd like it to be, where it's like true pounding, tough downhill running. The other thing is they've been able to turn teams over. So they've taken the football away. And you mentioned Kansas earlier. I mean, that was the difference in that one.
Yeah.
Was their ability to take the ball away from KU. And I think the other thing is situationally, they've been able to get after the passer. So there are some ways where, in some similar fashions, where Nebraska's looking at a lot of how they want to play. That's how Illinois has been able to play this year.
Yeah, I feel like the common theme in the pressers this week is physical. And even though that's Nebraska's goal, I mean, you see it on everything. It's like number 2 point, right? Be the most physical team out there. Do you feel like that's the bell to be answered this week about this team is physical, but that's our MO, and how did they improve on what they did last week?
Yeah, I'd have to really crunch the numbers, but at first blush, this is the biggest offensive line that Nebraska will see, I believe, in the Big Ten, where J.C. Davis goes 320, Geske is 325, Kreutz is the small guy at 290, Chrysler is 335, and Priestley is 320. Like, those are big, strong guys. Now, we'll see how Nebraska holds up, but it will be a game that I think is won, even with all the chances at 50-50 balls outside the numbers. I think the game is won and lost in the trenches.
Did you happen to hear how Ty Robinson talked at the press conference this week?
Oh, yeah. The
IQ there that he was sharing. I mean, obviously the players have been looking at film since Sunday. For him to share that, he knows exactly those numbers. Yeah. He knows that they're physical up front, and the way he was talking about how they work with one another differently based on their personnel that's out there. I mean, he's a 6-year guy. He knows what it's like when different guys come on. But I thought that was a major point where it was like, it's shifted. The mindset has shifted. The knowledge has shifted. We talk about turning the team over. That's a guy that's running that defense on the field.
Yeah, that's a beautiful example, because what that lets you know is, earlier you talked about going from year 1 to year 2 within the same nomenclature, right? The same defense. With him, where am I as a veteran on this group based on where I've been, and how is this applied to my game? Yeah, the micro is cool, my new staff, this is how I function. The macro is, you know what, how's my evolution in preparation as a person? And he's able to apply it. It was amazing that he went into that kind of detail, because they use Sunday as kind of a get ready. And Coach Rule isn't one of those guys that likes to make a Monday a Tuesday, a Tuesday a Wednesday. He kind of likes to stay on schedule, which is unique in its own right.
Yeah.
Because you don't want to feel like you're giving up a day. But I think the way that they handled Sunday allowed them a little normalcy. But for Ty to be that well-versed that early in the week, I felt like was a testament to his maturation. And there's a reason he's playing at such a high level. Like, he's become a game wrecker. And you don't become a game wrecker with just natural physical talents. It's the studying and the knowing of your opponent combined with your physical talent that allows you to be dominant.
Well, you already mentioned it, that Illinois is +8 on the turnover margin right now, and they've got 9 takeaways. Looking at Nebraska's offense here, how do they game plan? How do they attack for a defense that's been so strong so far?
Yeah, I think for them it's still going to be about putting Illinois out in space where they're not allowed to gang tackle and get to the ball and rip and strip, where it is overwhelming on ball carriers. So I think Nebraska will try to spread Illinois out and create those vertical running seams that way. And then it's isolating their receivers in space. Been a lot of consternation and hand-wringing about handling guys on the perimeter from a wide receiving standpoint and getting separation and running after the catch, all the things that fans like to talk about that will be on full display, because I like this secondary for Illinois, and I like situational how they match up their pass rushing too. So for Nebraska, they need balance. Run the ball, take your shot plays off of run action. There are some plays to be had there, in my opinion, for Nebraska's offense.
Okay, can you give us a football for dummies moment here? Because I need you to explain this.
Okay.
So I'm listening to the press conference yesterday, and Dylan's talking about a lot of pre- and post-snap reads because how much of disguise Illinois plays on defense. What does that look like in Dylan's position when he's having to make a post-snap read when a defense is throwing that much just, like different looks at him?
Yeah, so I'll give you one that Nebraska did defensively. It was the deflection that Bullock had in the flats, where I think Northern Iowa thought Nebraska was going to play with a too high safety look. They showed 2 pre-snap. The minute that ball was snapped, one of the safeties comes down into the box. It was Gifford. Bullock goes from an inside player to an outside player, and they go from 2 guys back deep to 3. Those are the things that happen to Nebraska. What he's starting to see now is, okay, this looks like man-to-man. And then pre-snap, the corners haven't moved. They're squatting. Those safeties are getting over the top. Oh, shoot, this is cover 2. I don't have the quick game outside the numbers that I thought. Because in man-to-man, you're thinking, I can just play pitch and catch outside the numbers. Well, when that corner's not giving ground, he's not going anywhere. So you run the risk of throwing him the football.
Yeah.
So I think the ability to process quickly is imperative for a young quarterback. But you know what I bet Nebraska does is you'll see them on Friday use a ton of motion. Because when you put guys in motion, you can kind of see if they can dictate coverage.
Yeah.
It's
or making anyone move.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Who blinks last is basically how that cat and mouse game goes. So it is very interesting for a young quarterback. But there are some things that sat and Coach Thomas. And you have to look at tendencies too.
Yeah.
Right? Like how has Illinois historically played this season versus this look when we do this, and what coverage do we think we're getting?
Yeah.
That's the beautiful part about coaching. And it's the really cool part about having a freshman quarterback that's playing at such a high level. He's a little more advanced than most. We'll see just how it develop on Thursday or Friday.
Yeah, hearing him talk, I was like, I hear those all the time, but now that I'm applying it to a freshman quarterback, all of a sudden it's like,
really
how
bright.
does that apply?
He's really bright.
Interesting. Well, if you had to break this thing down to 3 keys for this week's matchup for Nebraska 0-1, what is it?
Well, I'm going to start right there with the defensive recognition. You have to limit Illinois' ability to do the dictating. Nebraska has to be the dictator. That means you want to stay ahead of the sticks, and with your play calling, I'd say the first key is to keep Illinois on their heels. If you let this defense kind of settle in and kind of game you to death, they can be pretty good. Keep Illinois on their heels defensively. Number 2 is you got to win the turnover battle. Illinois has been very opportunistic. Don't give them the football and make them do it the hard way. And then number 3 is try to flip the field at least once, because I think it's going to happen. Flip the field at least once or twice with special teams, whether it's a punt inside the 10 or a key return. Keep an eye on the field flipping through special teams, because I think Nebraska can get one.
Awesome. Well, it'll be a special Friday Night Lights this week with the 400 sellout streak that started back in 1962. So we'll be here next week to preview the next game and look back on hopefully a victory for Nebraska on Friday.